Atmospheric beasts are the strangest flying monsters in the fields of UFOlogy, cryptozoology, and astrobiology. According to eyewitness accounts, these creatures were clearly living things, but they broke all the usual rules that biologists apply to living things. They seem to be able to fly around without wings. Their bodies are thus even represented as being semi-solid, often partially invisible. Sky serpents are elongated serpentine snakes or dragons that appear to float or fly in the air. They often move smoothly, as if they are airborne sea serpents. They are not the same as ordinary flying dragons. Some celestial snakes resemble shrimp with their slender body and thin arms that enable them to glide through the air as if they can fly without wings. Many sightings of atmospheric beasts were initially classified as extremely unusual UFO reports. Well-known Bigfoot author Ivan T. Sanderson devoted an entire book to theorizing that many UFOs are actually very low-density animals that originate in the clouds. One of the most famous atmospheric monsters is the Crawfordsville monster, sighted in Indiana in 1891, classified by some researchers as a dragon, described as a violently flapping thing with a flaming red eye, 20 feet long and about 8 feet wide. Descriptions of the creature vary, with some accounts suggesting it had no head, others describing it as having glowing red eyes and hot breath. Accounts generally agree that it is a large rectangular creature, possibly eel-like in appearance, with fins down the sides of its body. Witnesses at the second appearance described the creature as writhing and squirming, as producing a wheezing sound, as if it were in pain. A police officer described an encounter with the creature as allegedly occurred while he was riding his bicycle. The thing looked like a soft blanket and smelled like mildew. After rubbing against him, it flew away. It was one of the scariest experiences he had ever had. He believes that the thing is a living creature. In the Shetland Islands, atmospheric beasts are considered cloud animals. Just as the sea has its own life that is often hidden, clouds are said to form a vast atmospheric sea that far extends us, and they are just native organisms of the cloud. People who report being touched by atmospheric beasts often feel as they are being licked by an extremely soft tongue. For those who believe in them, atmospheric beasts are very fragile and gentle creatures originating from Earth or aliens from elsewhere. They are sometimes said to originate from other planetary atmospheres or interstellar gas clouds. So they are essentially aliens without a home planet capable of swimming in space. Believers generally consider atmospheric beasts to be unintelligent. So even if these creatures originated somewhere other than the Earth, they would still not be considered intelligent aliens. They are just animals. According to many eyewitness accounts, atmospheric beasts can change density, becoming smaller, harder, often metallic colored masses, or they can become larger and cloud-like, even to the point of being invisible. In some reports, they can shine. They can closely resemble whales. Believers think normal habitat of atmospheric beasts is high in the atmosphere, and they can perish if they touch the ground. Atmospheric beasts can resemble clouds and perform acts considered impossible for a real cloud, such as shooting a horizontal stream of water at people through their lips. Too active and animated for it to be a cloud. The most powerful atmospheric creatures may have mouths, eyes, fins, and other features, but these body parts are often arranged and shaped in ways that look completely alien, closer to marine invertebrates than animals we are used to seeing on a daily basis. It is commonly thought that when atmospheric beasts perish, they fall to Earth as gelatinous mass that can resemble a green, purple, gray, or iridescent jelly that evaporates within minutes, a few hours, or at most days. This is thought to explain star jelly, which puzzled scientists in the 1400s. Though now it is considered in scientific fields to not exist. Star jelly in Wales translates to rot from the stars. This phenomenon is also known as a gelatinous meteorite. Reports of it have come from all over the world, not just Wales. Gelatinous meteorites have not always been associated with the atmospheric beast theory. Atmospheric beasts are minor characters in folklore of many regions. They are often given local names. The English variety is often called boneless or shapeless, and is a small patch of living inanimate fog. Unlike fog, it can be felt as a semi-solid mass. In the last decades of the 20th century, the atmospheric beasts were almost forgotten. Serious investigators usually stay away, but these days interest in atmospheric beasts is growing. User Mystic Walk 3086 comments on a YouTube video by Ben Miller. In the late 90s, I was sitting outside on my mother's steps at night. It was a very clear sky with all the glittering stars visible. I noticed very high in the atmosphere a cloud that was moving very fast. It appeared as a normal white fluffy cloud, maybe a little squarish but still rounded. It appeared to me to be small, but it had to be huge because it was so very high in the sky and still quite visible to me. As it continued speeding across the sky on a straight path, it suddenly stopped and then reversed its path. As I stood there stunned by what I saw, clearly it was either an intelligent being or controlled by an intelligent being. User Yes a Bit, just Yes a Bit, comments, I've never seen a sky critter myself, but I did once run across the weird star jelly. I was out in some fairly open woods near Panama City, Florida. I guess it would be about 1981, and a friend and I were looking for ripe blackberries. We didn't find as many as we hoped for, so since I'm always interested in plants, we started looking for a little lady slipper orchids, and that's when we ran across the jelly. It was in a kind of boggy area scattered across the plants, wet ground, and logs, and it looked like the pieces had been larger than they were when we found them. There were marks on wet surfaces showing where the edges had been. The stuff was distinctively pink, about as stiff as Jell-O, and was scattered in chunky splats across the whole area. I don't know how far it went because there was a lot of mud and water around. We didn't go wading for fear of both gators and cottonmouths, of where there were plenty. But one thing I do remember is that there was an odd smell, kind of like ozone, not chemical, just a bit like you get when there's a thunderstorm coming. We were pretty baffled, and I remember scraping the goo off my shoes when we got back in my friend's car. On March 11th, 2011, a major earthquake occurred off the coast of Tohoku, Japan, causing a large tsunami to strike the coast. The ensuing devastation caused thousands to lose their lives or become homeless and damaged the Fukushima nuclear power plant, leading to one of the worst nuclear disasters the world has seen since Chernobyl. Almost immediately, a series of images of the devastation began to spread across news networks around the world. We witnessed the unstoppable wall of water destroying everything in its path. Entire cities flattened. Houses and boats pushed out like bath toys, nuclear reactors spewing ominous clouds of smoke, and unimaginable human suffering. Right there before our eyes, the power of nature revealed itself in all its terrible splendor, leaving everyone to watch in shock and awe. In the months following this tragic event, the country rushed to repair the damage and shut down the nuclear reactors that threatened to trigger a serious crisis. As the world watched in horror, a series of strange phenomena also began to emerge from the crisis, most of which were hidden from view of the mainstream media. Some people not only saw the damage caused by the tsunami, but also saw something strange that they could not explain. The days following the tsunami disaster in Japan were marked by countless reports of strange and unexplained objects in the sky above the quake-hit area. The reality is that earthquakes and tsunamis affect not only Earth and the seas. When the powerful earthquake hit, it not only shook the Earth, but also the sky. When earthquakes and tsunamis occur, they create surface movements that can trigger waves that can rise to one of the highest parts of the upper atmosphere, the ionosphere. These events are called ionosphere seismic disturbances. Research has shown that the March 11th earthquake created the largest atmospheric disturbance ever recorded. It is estimated to be 3 times stronger than the second largest earthquake recorded in the 2004 Sumatra earthquake. If atmospheric beasts do exist within Earth's atmosphere, it would be likely major seismic activity would disturb them. They would more frantically float about, causing an increase in sightings after an earthquake.
In March 2011, the world was shaken by a massive earthquake in Japan that caused widespread destruction and devastation. But the earthquake also triggered a mysterious event at a nuclear power plant in Fukushima. After the accident, 10 strange objects appeared in the sky above the damaged reactor and hovered over the site for several hours before disappearing into the night. The UFOs were there for a reason. It's well known that UFOs have a keen interest in our nuclear technology, and the Fukushima incident may have caught their attention. Were they there to monitor the situation, or perhaps to intervene in some way?
Witnesses claimed to see UFOs hovering near the plant with beams of light emanating from them, seemingly stabilizing the situation. The Fukushima disaster could have rendered a large part of Asia uninhabitable. Similar sightings have been reported during the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. Some propose that these occurrences are part of an agenda that has been shaping Earth's history for millennia.
A hidden hand in history that is manipulating events.
They believe that an alien civilization is guiding humanity toward a specific outcome through calculated interventions in critical moments of our history.
There are many more reported sightings from all around the world spanning decades. On a sunny morning in 1975, a science teacher was attacked by a bizarre creature hovering over his Long Island home. This creature appeared in the form of a cloud. It was aggressive. It shocked this young father and almost certainly changed the way he viewed the sky for the rest of his life. On the morning in question, he had just left his home and was about to get in his car when he noticed something floating above his house. It was what appeared to be a very small, dark cloud floating far below where clouds typically appear. Naturally, as a man of science, he was intrigued by the odd, vaporous object that seemed to be defying meteorological laws by traveling against the prevailing wind. He stared in wonder as the cloud seemed to move and slightly enlarge as he watched it. He later described how the enigmatic cloud-like thing, basketball-sized cloud, floated back and forth across the peak of the roof, changing in shape from a small globular mass to a larger void and finally becoming an abstract, multicolored, dark, vaporous something. It finally measured about 6 feet in height and 1.5 feet in width. Already perplexed by this anomaly, he would be traumatized by what happened next. This sentient cloud-like creature seemed to open a mouth and inhale. Adding to the oddity, the object pursed its lips, spitting a shower of water onto the man in his car. The now drenched man could only watch in bewilderment as the cloud creature simply dissolved before his eyes. Wasting no time, the man ran back to his home, bagged his wet shirt, the only tangible evidence of his amazing encounter, and put on dry clothes. He headed straight to his lab at Garden City Junior High. The teacher conducted a pH test on this watery shirt and discovered the substance he had been exposed to, both to his relief as well as dismay, was not any more of a hazardous substance than water. It was earthly material, not a scientific wonder. Although there are some atmospheric monsters, sightings of cloud-like apparitions are not as common, likely due to near absence of these phenomena, or people not recognizing a cloud as a beast as easily as they would something that appears more animalistic and unearthly. As absurd as this account may seem to be, one must assume that whatever it was he saw, his testimony should be believed, not only because of his academic background, but also due to the fact that he would have very little to gain and a lot to lose by coming forward with a story as bizarre as this. Still, if his observations are factual and this entity is actually a sentient being, then biological science as a whole is going to have to reevaluate their definition regarding what constitutes as a living organism. Perhaps sky-dwelling gaseous beings may be the most prevalent form of life on Earth, but we are unable to detect them due to a lack of interest or scientific expertise. The skies above us may be filled with intelligent life science does not yet recognize. In the summer of 1961, a woman and her 2 daughters had a terrifying encounter with a ghost floating in their Kentucky home, a creature so strange that some researchers believe it must come from another dimension or possibly even from hell. Although the facts in this case are few, little information we do have tells the story of a terrible night for one woman, identified herself only as Mrs. Quinn, suddenly woke up in her bedroom to find what she described as a terrible creature hovering near her bed. It was a big blob with a small round head without a neck. It looks like a roly-poly. Around its eyes there were wrinkles that glowed. The phrase roly-poly can be used to describe a pill bug or a punch toy that is usually inflatable and stands up when punched. It is assumed Quinn is referring to the toys, but perhaps this creature looks more like an insect. It's hard to be sure. Quinn watched in horror as a small dark creature drifted across her room towards the bed where her daughters were sleeping. That's when her 14-year-old daughter Judy woke up and saw this strange black apparition floating above her head. She describes the floating and apparently bioluminescent thing as looking like a dark baby with big eyes. Although the face of this big-eyed demon was more than enough to strike terror in those who witnessed it. What's worse, as Judy claimed, she can feel the creature is physically manipulating her in an attempt to make her act against her will. She explained, "I knew he wanted me to go somewhere. I found myself sliding out of bed. Suddenly the object released a strange force and disappeared. Perhaps because of the teenager's psychological resistance or for reasons still unknown, this terrifying creature disappeared, perhaps sliding back into its home dimension." In 2005, villagers living in a rural farming community in Thailand claimed to have encountered a creature from another world with a small, pale, yellow entity and red eyes that they believed was frolicking in the air over the rice fields. On the morning of August 31st, 2005, no less than 10 people in this small village claimed to have seen a strange yellow figure hovering over the mountainside across the rice and lemongrass fields. The first witness to the strange event was a man who claimed to have seen the creature while cycling past the fields around 8 a.m. He claimed he was completely sober when he noticed the creature. Said he initially thought the entity was a scarecrow that had been automated in some way, but upon further assessment he realized it was a living organism. The moment he became frightened was when this floating scarecrow nodded and looked straight at him with blood-red eyes. eyes in a way that made him think the creature was asking for help. He hurriedly left the scene and informed the rest of the village about this strange creature. He described it as armless humanoid with 2 small legs, pointed feet, and yellow skin, about 30 inches tall with a large head, equally large ears, attached to a relatively small body, but even more worrying was that gravity had no discernible effect on the seemingly alien monster. Several villagers rushed to the field to see it for themselves, later describing it almost unbelievably occurrent to reporters. They watched as the creature roamed around the field for nearly an hour, seemingly indifferent to the people watching it. This apparent obliviousness to observers is also a common characteristic described by eyewitnesses and numerous alleged alien encounters. The entity elongated, turned pitch black, and then disappeared into the sky like a rocket taking off. Others claim the creature disappeared into a glowing orb floating into the sky. Many villagers noticed floating fire falling from the sky near rice fields just one night before the alien sighting. It didn't take long for curious onlookers, about 100 a day, to flock to the small village from miles around, hoping to catch a glimpse of this mysterious entity. This prompted the local police to take action, and they tried to discourage visitors by claiming there was no evidence of the creature. By claiming that there was no evidence that the creature was alien or that it even existed. Other than eyewitness sketches, officers found no trace of damage in the rice fields, conveniently ignoring the fact it appeared that all witnesses confirmed the creature was hovering above rather than walking on the rice fields. Media interest in the incident became so great that the mayor asked the village chief to install cameras in the rice fields in case the entity returned. He was also forced to send a team of workers to repair the road through the field, which had turned into a pile of mud due to much traffic. Eventually, the public lost interest in the story. I cannot imagine if something like this happened in the center of a big city instead of a rice field in Royal Thailand. In the October 1959 issue of Ray Palmer's ufological periodical Flying Saucers, a letter written by pilot Don Wood Jr. was published, wherein he revealed what happened to him and his fellow pilots, who chose to remain anonymous. This encounter was way back in 1925. I must write to you of what happened to me in 1925, which I think solves most UFO reports. I have never told this to anyone, but can get signed affidavit if needed. 4 of us were flying over the Nevada desert. We landed on Flat Mesa near Battle Mountain, Nevada. The mesa is about 5,000 square feet, and the walls are too steep to climb unless a lot of work is done. We wanted to see what was on top of this flat place. We landed at 1 p.m. While walking around, we noticed something coming in for a landing. It was about 8 feet across and was round and flat like a saucer. The undersides were a reddish color. It skidded to a stop about 30 feet away. This next thing you won't believe, and I don't care, but it's the truth. We walked up to the thing, and it was some sort of animal like we never saw before. It was hurt, and as it breathed, the top would rise and fall, making a half-foot hole all around it like a clam opening and closing. It was then that Dawn and the 3 other pilots noticed the extent of the entity's injuries and that it seemed as if an even larger creature had taken a bite out of it. Quite a hunk had been chewed out of one of the sides of its rim, and a sort of metal-looking froth issued. When it saw us, it breathed frantically and rose up only a few inches, only to fall back to earth again. It was moist and glistened on the top side. We could see no eyes or legs, which must have been an adrenaline-fueled combination of awe, curiosity, and terror. The 4 pilots stared down at the writhing beast for several minutes. It was then that the creature attempted to rise again. After about 20 minutes of rest, it started pulsating once more. We stayed about 10 feet away, and so help me, the thing grew as bright as as all get out, except where it was hurt. It had a mica-like shell body. It tried to rise up again, but sank back again. The men were perplexed by this bizarre, slimy, bioluminescent flying creature. But before they could try to understand what it might be, a large shadow appeared over the mesa. The pilots stepped backwards and tilted their heads skyward to see a much larger animal 30 feet across that paid no attention to them but settled itself over the small one. 4 sucker-like tongues settled on the little one, and the big one got so dazzling bright you couldn't look at it. Both rose up and were out of sight in a second. They must have been traveling 1,000 miles an hour to get so high so fast. When we walked over there was an awful stench, and the frothy stuff the little one had bled looked like fine aluminum wire. There was more frothy, wiry stuff in a 30-foot circle where the big one had breathed. This stuff finally melted in the sun, and we took off. Unfortunately, though not surprisingly, the rapid evaporating metallic residue these creatures left behind was not preserved for further scientific study. This brief but terrifying encounter with an unknown, rapidly growing creature will forever haunt the 2 armed guards that came across it while on a routine night patrol near a sugarcane field in Cuba in 1915. While testimony related to this fascinating case is admittedly rare, it remains one of the oldest and most intriguing, mysterious reports to come from Cuba. The incident happened late in the evening when 2 unnamed men were patrolling the perimeter of the sugarcane field. The men were on horseback approaching a bend in the trail when suddenly their horses froze and began snorting as if in a panic. The men attempted to urge their horses forward when they both noticed what appeared to be a small white sack-like bundle on the ground adjacent to the trail. That this object was moving as though it were a living thing. The agitation of the horses quickly escalated into panic as the bundle seemed to crawl towards now terrified horses. At this point, one of the guards used his weapon and managed to fire several shots at the thing. Instead of stopping or even slowing down, this bizarre life form grew larger every time it was shot at. Within moments, the still advancing bundle had grown until it loomed almost as tall as the horses themselves. At this point, the men were terrified and feared the worst. For reasons undisclosed, perhaps the horses were simply too frightened to be ridden. The petrified guards dismounted, or may have been thrown off, and fearing for their lives, fled the area on foot, leaving their horses behind to fend for themselves. When they returned to the relative safety of their home, they discussed what they had seen, where it might have come from, and if they should tell anyone. They kept the terrifying encounter secret for a very long time. The next morning, the men became concerned for the welfare of their horses they had left behind, though the animals were found shortly after, wandering through the fields, seemingly unharmed. I would like to thank Rob Morphy for sharing these stories on the Cryptopia website. There isn't a lot of encounters of atmospheric beasts online from what I found. The majority was from him, and I wouldn't have been able to make a full video discussing this fascinating phenomenon without his work. Likely the majority of those who have encountered these beings have never heard of atmospheric beasts, so they simply categorize them broadly as being aliens, which could be the reason why stories seem to be obscure. I would love to know what other people think of this.